The sun was setting over the dry red land of New Mexico, painting the sky in shades of orange and gold. The desert wind carried dust in the faint cry of a hawk. In that vast empty land, a young Apache woman named Taji ran with all her strength. Her feet were bleeding, her breath came in sharp gasps, and her heart pounded with fear. Behind her, the sound of horses and gunshots echoed. For days, Taji and a small group from her tribe had been trying to escape after their camp was attacked. Their people had lost so much: food, family, even hope. The war between the Apache and the settlers had turned every sunrise into a new battle for survival. Taji had already lost her father and brother in the raids. Her mother had gone missing months ago. Now she ran alone, clutching a small knife in her hand, the only thing she had left from her family. The mountains stood tall in the distance, offering the only chance of safety. But the sound of hooves grew louder. The soldiers had found her trail. She pushed herself harder, running through the dry brush until her lungs burned. Then came the sound of a rifle shot. Pain tore through her shoulder and she fell to the ground, dust rising around her like a cloud. Her vision blurred. The world spun. Still, she crawled behind a fallen log, trying to hide. She pressed her hand against her wound, feeling the warm blood, and bit her lip to stop herself from crying out. Another shot hit the ground near her. She closed her eyes and whispered a prayer in her language, asking the spirits to take her home. The earth beneath her felt cool. Her heartbeat slowed. As night fell, silence replaced the chaos. The soldiers left, believing she was dead. The moon rose, casting a silver light on her still body. Coyotes howled in the distance. Hours passed. Her breathing grew shallow until it almost stopped. She believed that she had crossed over, that her spirit had left her body to join her ancestors in the land of peace. But fate had other plans. When Taji opened her eyes again, she didn't see the stars or the faces of her ancestors. Instead, she saw a wooden ceiling above her. The air was warm, filled with the smell of smoke, herbs, and something cooking. She blinked several times, confused. The soft sound of fire crackling filled the small room. She tried to sit up, but a sharp pain ran through her body. Her hand went to her side, and she felt bandages there. Her heart began to race. Where was she? What had happened? Just then, the door creaked open. A man stepped in, tall, with a sun-browned face and kind but tired eyes. He wore rough working clothes and carried a tray with a bowl of soup. Taji's breath caught in fear. He was a white man, the kind her people called enemy. Her hand reached for the knife she used to keep under her clothes, but it was gone. The man stopped when he saw her awake. "Easy there," he said softly. His voice was calm, not threatening. "You're safe. You were hurt bad. I found you out in the canyon." Taji didn't answer. She didn't trust his words. She turned her face away, refusing to meet his eyes. He placed the tray on a small table beside the bed. "You need to eat something," he said. "You've been out for 2 days." She stayed silent. Every muscle in her body was tense. Her mind screamed at her to run, but she was too weak to move. The man sighed quietly. "I'm Caleb Walker," he said after a pause. "I don't mean you any harm. You can rest here until you're strong enough to go." Then he stepped back and left the room, closing the door softly behind him. Taji lay there for a long time, staring at the firelight dancing on the walls. Nothing made sense. Why would a white man save her? Her people had suffered because of them. She didn't believe in his kindness. Maybe he wanted something. Maybe this was a trick. The next morning, the man came back. He brought her water and tried again to make her eat. She refused. He didn't argue, didn't raise his voice. He just said, "Suit yourself," and walked away. Later, she saw him through the small window, working outside, feeding his horse, chopping wood. He didn't look like a soldier. His movements were calm, quiet. Days passed like that. She watched him silently whenever he came in to change her bandages. His hands were gentle, careful not to hurt her. He spoke little, but when he did, his tone was always respectful. Taji slowly began to eat small portions, though she still kept her distance. At night, she couldn't sleep. The nightmares returned, memories of fire, screams, and the faces of her family. Sometimes she woke up crying softly, clutching the blanket. Once she opened her eyes to see Caleb sitting near the door, quietly watching to make sure she was all right. He didn't speak. He just nodded and went back to his corner. The next morning, she found a small carved figure on the table beside her, a tiny bird made of wood. She picked it up carefully. Its wings were spread as if ready to fly. She turned it in her hand, confused but touched. He had made it for her. When Caleb entered later, she looked at him for the first time without anger. "Why?" she asked quietly in broken English. He understood her question. "Because you were dying," he said simply. "And I've seen enough dying for one lifetime." Those words stayed in her heart. As days turned into weeks, her wounds began to heal. She could stand now and walk a few steps around the small cabin. She noticed things she hadn't before. A shelf full of books, a small wooden cross on the wall, a picture of a family she guessed was his. Caleb always worked from sunrise to sunset, bringing her whatever she needed without asking anything in return. Sometimes he tried to make her smile. He'd point to things and ask their Apache names, trying to repeat them with his strange accent. She couldn't help but laugh once when he mispronounced a word badly. He laughed too, and for a brief moment the wall between them faded. Still, when she looked out the window toward the distant mountains, her heart ached. That was her home. Somewhere out there might still be her mother, her people, or what was left of them. Every night she prayed silently, asking for guidance. She didn't know why she had survived when others hadn't. One evening, the sky turned red as the sun went down. Caleb came inside carrying firewood. Taji sat near the fire, the small wooden bird resting in her lap. He looked at her and said softly, "You'll be strong enough to travel soon." She nodded slowly but said nothing. The thought of leaving filled her with both relief and sadness. Before going to sleep, Caleb placed a folded blanket at the edge of the bed. "For the cold nights," he said. Then he moved to the floor near the door and lay there, giving her space. As the fire crackled, Taji turned the small bird in her hand and whispered to herself, "Enemy or friend?" Her heart didn't have an answer. That night she dreamed again, but it was different this time. She saw her father smiling, telling her not to live in hate. When she woke, tears rolled down her cheeks. The first light of dawn touched her face through the window. She looked over at Caleb, still asleep on the floor, his hat covering his eyes. For the first time since she was wounded, Taji smiled, a small, quiet smile. Somewhere deep inside, she felt that maybe the spirits had saved her for a reason. But even as peace began to grow between them, she knew that the world outside that cabin was not ready to understand what was happening inside. She was Apache and he was a white rancher. Enemies by birth, yet connected by fate. And though she didn't know what tomorrow would bring, she was no longer afraid to face it. Morning light filtered through the small window of the cabin. Taji woke up to the sound of birds outside and the smell of coffee brewing. Her body still ached in places, but she was stronger now. She could walk across the room without help. The wounds had healed, leaving only thin scars, silent reminders of what she had been through. Caleb was outside feeding his horses. He looked up when she stepped out for the first time in weeks. The desert stretched far and wide around them, endless land, golden under the sun. She breathed in the air deeply, feeling both free and lost. "You're looking better," Caleb said, setting down a bucket of water. His voice carried quiet pride. Taji nodded, her long, dark hair moving with the wind. "Strong now," she said in broken English. He smiled gently. "Good. You'll need that strength." For a few days, life seemed peaceful. They shared food, laughter, and stories in their own way. His few words of Apache, her few words of English. Caleb showed her how to make bread, and she showed him how to read tracks on the ground. They learned from each other like two travelers from different worlds meeting halfway. But peace in those times never lasted long. One afternoon, while Taji was fetching water from the well, she saw 3 riders in the distance. Dust rose behind them. Her heart tightened. They were soldiers, blue coats glinting in the sun. She ran inside and whispered, "Men coming." Caleb's eyes darkened. He stepped outside, putting on his hat. "Go inside. Don't make a sound." She obeyed, hiding behind the curtain near the window. Her heart pounded as she watched the men approach. The leader of the soldiers spoke loudly. "Afternoon, Walker. We're looking for Apache stragglers. Word is one was seen near the canyon." Caleb's voice stayed calm. "Haven't seen anyone." One soldier dismounted and looked around the barn. "You sure? You live close to their trails." I'm sure, Caleb replied, his tone firm but polite. The men searched a bit, kicked up dust, then finally rode away, leaving behind the echo of hoofbeats. Only when they were gone did Caleb go back inside. Taji looked at him, eyes full of worry. They kill me? She asked softly. He nodded slowly. If they had seen you, they might have taken you away. That's why you can't stay long. It's not safe for either of us. His words hurt her more than she expected. She looked down at her hands. You want me to go? Caleb shook his head. No, Taji. I want you to live. That night she couldn't sleep. She sat near the fire, staring at the flames. The cabin had become a strange comfort, a place she never thought she would feel safe in. Yet now she was being pushed back into a world that didn't want her. Her people might be gone, the soldiers hunted her, and the only person who had shown her kindness was the one she was supposed to hate. In the morning, Caleb gave her a small leather pouch filled with dried food and a canteen of water. You can ride my horse till you find your people, he said quietly. She stared at him in disbelief. Your horse? He nodded. He'll take care of you. You saved my soul just by being here. Maybe it's time I give something back. Taji didn't fully understand his words, but she felt their meaning. Her eyes softened. You good man, she said. He chuckled lightly, though his eyes were sad. Maybe I'm just trying to be one. As she packed her things, silence filled the air. Neither of them knew what to say. The desert wind blew through the open door, carrying the smell of dry grass. But fate wasn't finished with them yet. Just as Taji was about to leave, the sound of horses thundered again, louder this time, angrier. Caleb looked out and froze. The same soldiers had returned, and this time there were more of them. Go! Out the back! He shouted, but before she could move, the door burst open. The officer stepped inside, eyes sharp. We knew you were lying, Walker. Where is she? Caleb stood tall, blocking their view. There's no one here. The soldier pushed past him. Taji tried to hide behind the bed, but the man's eyes caught her movement. There! The Apache girl! He yelled. Everything happened fast. One of the soldiers aimed his rifle. Caleb stepped in front of her. The shot rang out, echoing through the cabin. Caleb fell to the floor, clutching his side. Caleb! Taji screamed. Her hands trembled, but she grabbed his old rifle from the wall. She didn't shoot to kill. She just fired toward the ground, the sound exploding through the small cabin. Startled, the soldiers backed away. The horse outside neighed loudly. Taji stood between Caleb and the door, her eyes fierce. The officer raised his hands. Easy, girl. You don't want more trouble. But her voice was strong. Go, she shouted. Go now. Something in her tone made them hesitate. They backed away slowly, then mounted their horses and rode off, cursing under their breath. The dust settled once more. Taji dropped the gun and ran to Caleb. Blood stained his shirt, but he was still breathing. His eyes fluttered open, weak but calm. Why? You do that? She whispered through tears. He smiled faintly. Couldn't let them take you. I promised myself no more innocent blood. She tore strips of cloth from her shawl and pressed them against his wound. You no die, she said desperately. You help me. Now I help you. Caleb winced but managed a small laugh. Stubborn. Just like I thought. She stayed by his side all night, refusing to sleep. She cleaned his wound and prayed silently, asking her ancestors to spare him. The wind outside howled, but inside the cabin there was only the crackle of the fire and her quiet voice singing an old Apache healing song. When morning came, Caleb's breathing was steadier. His eyes opened, meeting hers. You stayed, he murmured. Taji smiled softly. You saved me once. Now I save you. Days passed. Slowly, Caleb began to heal. He was weak but alive. Taji cooked for him, cared for the animals, and kept watch outside every night. The danger was still there, and soldiers might return, but she wasn't afraid anymore. One evening, as they sat outside under the stars, Caleb said quietly. You should still go when you can. Find your people. Don't let this world break you. She looked up at the night sky. Maybe, this my people now, she said. Here I learned kindness. He didn't answer, but his eyes softened. For a long time they sat in silence, watching the stars. When Caleb was finally strong enough to move, Taji saddled the horse. She knew it was time to go, not because she wanted to, but because she had to. If she stayed, the soldiers would come again. Caleb handed her a small pouch of coins. For your journey, he said. She shook her head. I not need. Take it, he insisted. You saved my life. Let me do this much. Her eyes filled with tears. She placed her hand over his and whispered, I never forget you, Caleb Walker. He smiled. And I'll never forget the brave Apache woman who taught me how to forgive myself. She climbed onto the horse and looked back one last time. The rising sun painted the land in gold. Caleb stood by the cabin, his figure glowing in the light. Taji raised her hand in farewell. He lifted his hat in return. As she rode away, the desert wind blew against her face. She didn't know what waited ahead, maybe danger, maybe hope. But she knew one thing for certain. She was no longer the woman who had closed her eyes to die. She had been reborn through kindness, courage, and an unexpected friendship. Somewhere, in that wide, wild land, two hearts from different worlds had met, not as enemies, but as humans who chose compassion over hate. And though the world around them might never understand, their story would live quietly in the wind, whispered by the desert forever.